Welcome back to this series, A Song Is Born, where we follow a song from birth until it's released upon the world. And this is episode number 7, where we'll start mixing the song. In the next couple of videos, I'll go through the mixing process, which is somewhat a mix of what we did in the 80s and the 2020s. I'll go through my processing chain, my plugins, my hardware effects processors, etc. Pretty much everything you'd want to know about the mixing of this song. I've said it before and I'll say it again, there's nothing wrong with doing everything in the box. I hear lots of good mixes these days done exactly that, in the box, with software and plugins only. That's totally fine. I like to do it a slightly different way, in a sort of hybrid setup with both software and hardware. I like hardware because it's the way I grew up, the way I learned my mixing things back in the 80s and 90s. And I like to have my fingers on faders while I mix the song, have it playing in real time, doing adjustments in real time. I just like that. So we'll start off this episode by transferring what we've recorded so far on the first DAW, and we'll transfer that over to the next DAW, which will be our main DAW for mixing. And in that process, a lot of the recorded tracks will be transferred with effects and processing on them. This is very typical of the 80s. You had to mix down stuff, submix down stuff, to fit on the total of tracks you had available on your analog tape recorder. So that meant in the mixing process later, some choices had already been made. So you should definitely not miss this episode, where I show you a lot of my processing going on the already recorded tracks, which will be transferred over. So let's head over to the first DAW and I'll get started. Now, when I'm exporting these vocal tracks for final mixing, I'm going to do a sort of a mix of wet and dry exports, as well as mono and stereo stems. So I have a lot to choose from later when I'll start mixing the song. And if you take this main vocal track as an example here, this is the verse and pre-choruses, the whole song. If you remember back when we did the vocal track and the vocal edits, I did a lot of edits, and I've done even more now. I've taken the inhales, exhales, etc. and put them exactly where I want them to be. I've taken out some noise and clicks, etc. here and there. So this vocal track is now ready to go. And what I'll do is I'll take off all the reverbs and delays, etc. On the insert effects chain, I'm keeping everything. So I'm going to export everything with the insert chain intact and one without it. I have a simple compressor going on here. I also have the SSL channel strip here with EQ and compression as well. I might turn to the hardware SSL EQ for this vocal track later, but for now, let's keep this channel strip plugin on here. And I have the de-essing on my vocals as well. So I'm going to export that out in 2 different passes. I've set the recording path, or the export path. It'll be a mono export at 44.1 kHz. I only operate with 44.1 kHz and the bit depth of 24 bits. And when it comes to the chorus vocals, as you can see here, I have 2 tracks here called left and right, also with the harmonies left and right. So I'm going to export these out as stereo stems, along with the vocal harmonies left and right, also as a stereo stem. And the main vocal, the unison part, the same as these 2 here, will be exported out alone. Again, I'm taking off reverbs and delays, etc., but keeping the insert effects, just as we did on the other vocal track here. So I'm doing this in several passes as well, to give me both dry and wet options for later mixing. So this is basically what we'll do with the vocal tracks. The exception is the talking part in the bridge, where I'm keeping the delay and reverb, as I just like them that much, and I'm not going to change that. So these will stay on. If I need to go back later and do some edits, I'll go back to this DAW, do the edits here, and export that over to the next DAW again. Let's hope that's not going to happen. Now, when it comes to the synths, and we've recorded quite a few since we started this series, I will not export all of them out as separate mono tracks, like the Prophet 2000 sounds in the intro here. These can easily be exported out as a stereo pair, the high and low octaves. And I will also keep all the reverb delay settings I put on these synths in this DAW here, because I don't see any real changes taking place in the final mix later for the synth parts. Synths are often heavily drenched in effects from the get-go when you record them, so I've pretty much recorded these and pre-mixed these in this DAW here, as I want them to sound in the final mix. The balance is also quite right in this pre-mix here, but I will have to adjust the internal balance later, but the effects will remain as they are here now. So let me export this out and let's see how it goes. When it comes to the guitars, I'm going to export out one mono track of the electric guitars played by the guitarist, and I'm going to export out one mono stem of the sampled electric guitars, the ones from the Akai S900, in two separate passes, of course. And on the electric guitar played by the guitarist, I'm going to turn off all the reverbs and delays, etc. But I'm going to keep the compression and a little bit of harmonizing and the channel EQ. I'm using the same EQ as we did on the funky bit on the bridge. So that's the same EQs I use throughout the entire electric guitar here. So you can go back to that video to watch that even further. And I'm going to EQ these guitars even more when it comes to the mixing in the other DAW. So for now I'm keeping the processing on the guitars, while I'm muting the delays and reverbs. And the drums, well, I'd be very surprised if I don't replace some of these sounds later. We will see once we start mixing. I will mix down, export out stems of some of these sounds now. The TR-808 sounds we did earlier will definitely stay with us throughout, so I'll mix those down as a stereo stem. And the kick I will do separately, the snare I will do separately. And I'll just chew my way through these drums now and export them out. But most of these drums I'm exporting now, including the stems. I will keep most of the effects going from this first mixing session. So I'll go through some of the settings I have on these drums here. So let's solo the TR-808 first. I showed you some while we did record them, but I'll show you more of the effect settings we're running right now. Let's hear a little bit of them. So you have some delays, you have some reverb going. So in the medium conga, I have a little bit of delay going. I have a little bit of reverb going, a preset in the Valhalla called Fat Drums. I might have done some changes to the preset here, I can't remember. And on the clap, we have a long reverb, the very nice Hall preset with some modifications. Let's see what else. The rim shot, again some delay. We have a little bit of Hall reverb again here. I'm varying the pre-delay from sound to sound. That's very important to give some space between the initial attack of the sound and the reverb coming, so that will always be adjusted throughout different sounds, vocals, etc. to fit the song. Not necessarily in terms of tempo, but sometimes it's the feel of how it makes me feel listening to it. So I'm not doing everything in terms of tempo necessarily. It'll vary depending on how I feel the sound should come out in terms of reverb. So let's check out these four together again. So let's just export these out and move on. As for the kick sound, well, in this DAW here, I have a little bit of reverb going on that. So I will take that off and let's listen to it. So there's no EQ or anything going on here. I only send it out for a little parallel compression in this DAW. So I'll keep that on it. It's just a little bit. And this is the kick sound I'll export over to the next DAW. If this kick sound will survive the final mix, I'm not sure right now. It sounds good here. Maybe it doesn't cut through enough with enough bottom end. I won't know that until later, but it will be a breeze to replace this with another kick drum if I want to again later. So for now, I'll just export it out as you're hearing it here in a mono export. So that's the kick. When it comes to the snare, well, let's listen to it. Again, some fat drums preset from Valhalla here. I have a lot of EQ going here. Let's listen to that without the EQ. Not that much of a difference, but the really major things going on here is these plugins here. I have a pitch shifter on here. To make it sound a little, going up in key. Some more compression and EQ. But I also take that down a notch with this filter here. So there's a lot of processing going on to make this snare sound the way it does. If you've watched all the previous videos, you're getting used to the track by now. You're getting used to how it sounds, and maybe you'll think that, well, this is the snare sound of the song now because you've heard it so much. Well, I have to see beyond that and listen beyond that, and well, for now we'll keep the snare and export it over with all these effects and plugins on it. When I sugarcoat the song, the mix, the production in the very last video or the last couple of videos, I'll often go in and change things right at the end. So I think this will happen here as well. But again, for the gazillionth time, let's see how it goes. So let's export this out without the reverb, mind you. That's very important. So yeah, let's export out this snare. And for the rest, let's listen. Yeah, those crash cymbals down here, they will definitely have to go. So I think I'll just mute these for now and replace them later. We have the congas, we can listen to those. Some quarter note delays from the Eventide H3000 factory plugin from Eventide. So these can be exported out as they are. I'm not going to change these later. This is coming in right after the first chorus. So let's export them out. The toms. Not sure these will survive either. I have some EQ and compression going on these as well from the oppressor in the Eventide, the Ultra Channel plugin. And a little bit of reverb as well from the Fat Drums Valhalla here. So I'll mute that and have to do it on every one of these, of course. Yeah, I'll export them out and again, we'll see how it goes. So let's mute those toms, and what do we have left? Okay, so we have the hats, and those hats, well, they have a little bit of fat drums on them as well. Not much in terms of EQ, nothing, and no parallel compression either, so these are pretty clean. So I'll take the reverb off and let's export those hi-hats. And if we mute the hats, we have some rim shots here. Fat drums again on the rim. And on the clap, so we can mute those straight away. And I think the clap has a little bit of just a little bit of high passing there, so that can stay on. So let's export out that rim and that clap into separate passes as mono tracks, and we'll pretty much be done with these drums for now. And here's a secret trick for you. If you remember back when we recorded that Tal sampler bass line, I said that the bass track itself, the bass sound, didn't cut through in all the frequencies it needed as we went up and down the octaves. So today we're going to have to double that bass part with another bass sound to make it really cut through all the right frequencies as we're playing up and down. This is the Yamaha FB01, but it could easily have been the DX21 or DX11, etc. Any 4-operator FM synth will do. And what I'm after is a bass sound that sounds consistent, that doesn't die out, which has the right amount of energy in the low mids and below, which can sound pretty rubbish in itself, but it's going to be layered underneath the main bass track to fill out the body of the sound of that bass track, the main bass track. So in itself, this sounds... nothing special in itself, but listen to the tone. It's consistent throughout the octaves. It doesn't dip in volume, in loudness very much. So this will be perfect to layer underneath. So I'm gonna MIDI the main bass track to this Yamaha FB01. I'm going to record the sound coming out of this, and we're going to layer it to taste and what's needed later in the final mix. Now I'm just recording that part from the FB01, the same as the master bass track, and we'll see how it sounds in that first DAW here at first, and we'll transfer it later. And here we have the two bass lines, both sounds. I've now exported out that Tal sampler bass from the MIDI track in stereo. And the same MIDI track is the foundation for the new bass track from the Yamaha FB01. And you can clearly see the waveforms looks different as well. The Tal sampler has more of the initial attack, the transient, while the tone dies out pretty quick. And on the Yamaha FB01, you can clearly see that the waveform looks different. It has more the body of the sound throughout the length of each note. So together, these will form the foundation. So before we solo each of the tracks and hear them together to see how much difference and how much more energy there is in the overall total bass sound, I just want to make sure that I've shown you that I have some plugins going on that second bass line. I have a compressor going, I have a bass rider going to even out the sound even more, and I have a little bit of filter going on, and the filter is doing a low pass of everything above 500 Hertz, so I'm just letting through the lower parts of that bass sound. Again, I'm after the body, not the transient. The Tal sampler bass line takes care of that transients. So let's have a listen, and let's start with the Tal sampler bass alone. And so you can clearly hear the transient, the attack is well preserved, and the note just dies off pretty quick, so that there's not much left of body in the sound. So now let's add that new layered sound and see how it sounds. And this will of course be added to taste, how much of that sound I want to hear in the final mix. This is now just a preliminary mix. I will export this over to the second DAW as well as I did with the other tracks. But this is an example of how we add more energy to the track, more body to the track, the bass track. And pay attention to that second part, the last part of the pre-chorus. Let me dampen everything else. Not much left of that bass sound, but let's add the new second layer. So this is a very important part, to have a consistent, solid bass line underneath everything. I want both the attack and the body of the sound. So let's transfer these over to the new DAW, and we're soon done with transferring all the files. Now, as I went through these tracks with you, transferring them to the new DAW, I took off the delays and reverbs on most of the sounds, and that's very important. When you set up the final mix now in the second DAW, I want total control over the reverbs and the delays. The question is, what reverb unit should we use for this song, and maybe we should use more than one? Let's go through the options we have. And let's try the AMS RMX 16 from late 1981 first, with its classic ambience program. This is a 500 series model remake from AMS Neve, and it should sound exactly like the original. And what I like about this model and the original as well is that everything is laid out in front of you on the panel here. There's no hidden menus or anything. You just dial in your reverb program, you set the pre-delay, you set the reverb time, and you have low and high EQ. Let's check it out on my vocals here. Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more. I wanted to say so much. One of the reasons the ambience program is so loved is because it's neutral yet expansive, and it just blends in with the source you feed into it. If you have any ambient reverbs on your vocals from before, in this case, using that ambience program just blends it all together in a beautiful way. Let's adjust the pre-delay and decay time. Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more. I wanted to say so much. I wonder why we didn't make it through. I wonder why. Just beautiful, and I think this is really a good contender for the vocal tracks on this song. But let's try some of the other programs. Here's the plate. Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more. I wanted to say so much. I wonder why we didn't make it through. I wonder why. That sounds nice as well. One of the famous programs from the AMX RMX 16 was the non-lin program with its gated reverb. Let's check it out on the vocals. Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more. I wanted to say so much. Let's dial in some of the other programs as well to check them out. Make it through. I wonder why. Can I have one more go? All of the programs in the AMS RMX 16 are classics in a way. You've heard them so many times on different hit records. Let's do a couple of more passes where I adjust the high and low EQ and the input-output levels as well. Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more. I wanted to say so much. I wonder why we didn't make it through. Oh, in case you were wondering, I'm using the scratch vocals we did early for these tests here, not the final vocals. All things considered, I think the ambience program is the program to use if you're going to end up using this on this song. And only a few years later, in 1984, Roland released their first professional reverb unit, the SRV 2000. Let's check that out. And just like the RMX 16, this has everything laid out in front of you. A notch-less LED display showing the most important parameters like decay time, pre-delays, etc. The SRV 2000 also has a really nice EQ section that you can use to tailor your sound. It can do halls, rooms, plates, and also some non-lin gated reverbs. And it was very much used on gated snares in the 80s. It has a lovely grainy sound to it. But not all snare sound had gated reverbs on them in the 80s, and my song here will not have that, so I'm not going to use it for that. I'm checking this out again for the vocals. And I have to say, the room programs on this SRV 2000 are really excellent. And if you vary the decay time and pre-delay, these can really stand out on vocal tracks in my opinion. So let's check some of that out on our song here. Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more. I wanted to say so much. I wonder why we didn't make it through. Sounds nice, but let's adjust a couple of values here. I'm going to change the pre-delay first. The pre-delay sets the amount of time which elapses between the input of signal and the onset of reverberation. On my vocals here, I find that a pre-delay of about 80 milliseconds is very nice. And you can double that as well for an even greater effect. It all depends. So let's change out a couple of settings and values as we go along. Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more. I wanted to say so much. I wonder why we didn't make it through. I wonder why. Can I have one more go? Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more. I wanted to say so much. I wonder why we didn't make it through. I wonder why. Can I have one more go? Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more. I wanted to say so much. I wonder. I think the SRV 2000 is incredibly underrated as a reverb unit today. I like it much more than the DAP5 that came after it. So maybe we should use this on our song. Well, let's move on. Let's take a look at a giant, the Lexicon 480L from 1988. And as soon as you see this remote controller for this reverb unit, the Lark, you know that you're dealing with an icon. Every stereo pick you've ever seen from a pro studio in the 80s and 90s and 2000s and way up to now, you always see one of these remote controllers in the studio room, often placed on top of the mixer itself. And with this, you can access all the parameters, adjust all the values of the programs you want to use from the 480L. And believe me, they are legion. So let's try this on our song then, on our vocals. And let's go for a program called Dark Hall, part of the concert hall algorithm. And let's check it out on our track here. Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more.
I wanted to say so much. I wonder why we didn't make it.
So let's make some adjustments here as well. And the first thing I want to adjust is the reverb time, the decay time. And when you move the fader for adjusting that, you have to pass through the set value that's part of the program first before you can change it. That's why I have to move the fader up and down a little bit to change the value. I will also change the pre-delay again to have a little gap between the signal and the onset of reverberation itself. And I'm going for somewhere near 80 milliseconds again, like we did on the last reverb, which I found is nice. So let's check this out.
Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more. I wanted to say so much. I wonder why we didn't make it through. I wonder why.
Another parameter you can change is the crossover, and the crossover sets the frequency at which the transition from the low frequency reverb time to the reverb time of the mid frequencies takes place. This can make an impact on your sound in a nice way.
Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more. Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more.
And you have a reverb time high frequency cut to make the decay time much more dark, very much preferred by American producers back in the day. Whitney Houston, etc. always had dark reverbs.
Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more. I wanted to say so much. I wonder why we didn't make it through. I wonder why. Can I have one more go?
Like I said earlier, the dark hole program is a part of the concert hall algorithm, and the concert hall algorithm is what we call a modulated reverb algorithm, meaning you have a modulation, a chorus going on the reverb tail that can be modulated, adjusted to taste.
Can I go back? Can I go back in time?
You can hear the tail is being modulated, the reverb tail.
I wanted more.
You can't go too far on a vocal as it'll sound very unnatural and artificial.
More.
But it can be very useful on guitars, pianos, etc., instruments, synths, etc. But a little bit of this is actually very usable on vocals as well. I use it all the time and I love this effect. I love modulated reverbs.
Can I go back? Can I go back in?
A very important parameter is the diffusion, and diffusion controls the degree to which the initial echo density increases over time. In general, use a high setting of diffusion for things like percussion or maybe drums, but use a low setting for things like vocals or overall mixes, piano music, etc.
I wanted more.
The best way to describe the sound of the 480L is majestic. However, is this what we want on our song? I don't know. So we've looked at the AMS RMX 16, the SRV 2000 and the 480L, both solid hardware solutions. Let's check out one in the box solution, the Valhalla Vintage Verb.
Can I go back? Can in time. I wanted more. I wanted to say so much. I wonder why we didn't make it through. I wonder why. Can I have one more?
And this is actually a 480L in the box. Very nice, very cool, sounds fantastic.
Can I go back? Can I go back in time?
And this is so much fun to use, so easy, so fast. You have everything laid out in front of you. The diffusion times, the shapings, the modulations, we have the EQs, you have the damping, the decay time, pre-delay, and also a wet-dry knob. It's so easy to use, sounds fantastic, and this is really the go-to reverb for me when I'm working in the box, and even so, I often use this over any of the hardware solutions. I like it that much. I think this is the best plugin ever made, the best bang for the buck you can get in terms of any plugin. And you know what? Hardware or software, just turn those knobs, adjust those faders, adjust those levels, turn this, turn that. It doesn't really matter if you know what they do or not. Just mess around until you find something you think sounds good, that works well for your project. The truth is, back in the 80s, that's how most producers and engineers worked anyway. That's how they found that gated drum sound or that famous money for nothing guitar sound, etc. Again, just by messing around and doing things that they were not supposed to do, really. With the release of this song, I will release it in two versions. So one is out of the box with a lot of hardware, reverbs, etc. And one version done entirely in the box, and I will use Valhalla Vintage Verb on my vocals.
Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more. I wanted to say so much. I wonder why we didn't make it through. I wonder why. Can I have one more go?
When it comes to the delay unit we're going to use for this song, and especially for the vocals, well, there's only one choice here, and that's the TC2290 digital delay. So I've set up the 2290 here as a simple half-note delay on the vocals here. No fancy triplets, no dotted notes or anything, just plain and simple half note, and I've matched the milliseconds delay time with the tempo of the song. The song is in 114 BPMs, and a delay time of about 1060 milliseconds is just right for this song. It's slightly off from the precise settings or time in milliseconds, but that's part of the charm as long as the delays doesn't interfere with other parts of the arrangement. A delay time slightly off from the precise calculation is no worry. So I've set up this here now. On this fader here I have the main vocals, and on this fader here I have the returns from the 2290, and on this auxiliary send I'm sending the vocals out to the 2290, coming back on the returns here. So I can adjust this to taste as we're going along and do some mixing of the delay, so I can have the delays coming forward and be more prominent in the mix, and I can turn them back when I want to. I'll give you an example of that shortly. Oh, and one more thing, I've re-recorded the vocals for the verse here. I wanted the word back and more to be shorter. Can I go back? Wanted more. I don't think the delay comes through in the way I wanted, and I want those words to be shorter. So now I'm singing, can I go back? I wanted more. So you can hear the delay better. It's coming up right now, so let's give it a spin.
Can I go back in time? I want
So there you heard the new vocal line. Let's do it again, and I'll mix in the delay, as I'm probably gonna do it in the final mix as well. Let's go.
Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more. I wanted to say so much.
And there you heard it, mixed louder in some places and back to normal for the rest of the line. We can solo the vocal in itself.
Can I go back? Can I go back in time? I wanted more. I wanted to say so much. I wonder why we didn't make it through. I wonder why. Can I have one more go? One call, the sound of.
I think the 2290 has a sound of its own. I just like the way it produces your echoes, your delays in a very musical way, and it sort of gives you that, good old feeling. You sort of have heard this sound before in a way, and you have on numerous 80s hits. So let's crack on. Well, that pretty much sums it up for this episode. In the next one, we'll start setting up the mix in the second DAW, pipe the signals out through the converters and into the SSL mixers. We'll set up all the reverbs, the delays, the processing we need for each of the different stems or tracks, and we'll soon hear how it all comes together. So I hope to see you there. See you next time. Cheers.